program called Carnivores, Livelihoods, and Landscapes. We do more than just cheetahs, and I'll kind of explain that as I go through this presentation. And so carnivores as a whole are what make a balanced ecosystem in the African savanna. And underneath our Action for Cheetahs in Kenya research, we have three main projects. The Cool Crafts is the project that's in the back here, which is working with communities to do sustainable crafts and to use that as an alternative livelihood program. I'll talk a little bit more about that as I get to the end. And then we have All Things Dogs, which is kind of my focus in my talk today, is what we do with dogs. So we have two dog programs. One is our Scat Dogs, the other one is our Ginger's Hope. Scat Dogs are dogs that find cheetah fecal material, and the Ginger's Hope project is a vaccination and sterilization campaign. So I'm going to take a little step backwards and talk a little bit about why cheetahs. I had somebody come in today and say, why should people in Battle Creek care about cheetahs? Cheetahs are a vulnerable and endangered species. They have gone from over 100,000 down to less than 7,000 in less than a century. And so, like many of the other large carnivores, they need protection. And I seem to have gotten the calling to do the protection of cheetahs in Africa. And so here at the zoo, you don't have cheetahs at this zoo, but you do have a lot of other African animals that live in the same habitat as the cheetah. Cheetahs are declining by about 2% a year, and that is mostly because of land use change. And so what we try to do is to find ways that we can protect the corridors that the cheetahs live in and protect human livelihoods that work together in those corridors. Over 75% of the cheetah population is outside of protected areas. So a little history of our project. We started out working in this little central area of a place where we had no idea how much cheetahs still remained there. And what we realized is once cheetahs have gone extinct in an area, and the reasons that they've gone extinct, it's virtually impossible to reintroduce them into those areas. So what we needed to do is to work in the areas where the cheetah populations were still strong and to try to maintain their strength. So we moved down into the southern part, again, an area that we didn't know very much about, and we started our Salama site. When we began working there, it was community conservation area. Well, community area, it wasn't actually a conservation area, it was community-owned land. And in the first year or two that we were there, we found out that the land was being subdivided into individual plots and that people were going to develop and settle the area. The government themselves had plans for a technical city, which was going to take out 5,000 acres of some of the habitat that had the most wildlife in that area. We were too late. I monitored the population of cheetahs from 30 down to 0 in less than 15 years. 23 cheetahs were hit by car on the highway alone. That's not that people are trying to kill cheetahs. This is literally that development was happening so fast that it was impossible for the cheetahs to survive there. Now, I told you there was a population of 30, but those 30 were having babies while we were there. So the cheetahs didn't all die. Many of them moved off into these areas off to the side, which are pastoral communities or nomadic communities. So again, we realized we needed to move how we were studying if we were going to prevent such extirpation from happening in other areas. So we did our first national cheetah survey. In that national cheetah survey, we traveled all over Kenya. I lived in a car pretty much for about 3 years, camping out of the back of the car, conducting interviews, and looking at where cheetahs still survived. And happily, what we found is there still was a pretty amazing amount of connectivity in the cheetah population throughout Kenya. And so how do we maintain those corridors? And how do we work with people who live in those areas? Because those are primarily nomadic pastoral communities who move as the weather changes. And there was very little settlement, especially in the northern part of Kenya. It still has a lot of open and connected habitat. And so that's where we decided was probably going to be the stronghold for cheetahs. There is another project, the Mary Wykstra project, that works down in the Masai Mara area. We do work together with her as well. This Mara area down here is connected to where the Tanzania cheetah population is the strongest. which is the Serengeti, through Mount Kilimanjaro to Tarangire. And so that cheetah population is also quite connected, but it's outside of the boundary of Kenya. It's still important for cheetahs, but it isn't an area where I can work right now doing cross-boundary. So my focus area became the Mary Community Conservancy up in the north. It's 1,150 square kilometers, which is about 280,000 acres of land. It is a community property, so fully owned and operated by the community. Again, a pastoral community, so there's not really much settlement. Those settlements are very mobile. And it doesn't actually have any national park connected directly to it, but luckily we are surrounded by other conservation areas, so other conservancies. In Kenya, a conservancy is land that is managed for livelihoods, which in this case is mostly cows and camels, and managed for wildlife. And so for that population, we felt that that was a pretty good stronghold for cheetahs in Kenya, and a way that we could conduct research with the border conservancies, put our permanent base into that area. So having moved over there in 2001, in 2010 to 2014 is when we established the site. 2015 to 2017, we built our research camp there. And as a research camp, I do still live in a tent. I do still have drop toilets, and I live off-grid, and I have a solar system for my power. But we work within the community, trying to stay as connected to the community as we can. So what was causing cheetahs to be in conflict with people in these areas was actually that cheetahs do opportunistically take goats and sheep, which the pastoral communities in the north, traditionally they would have had cattle, and cattle would have been what is their life, and they don't like to kill their cows to eat them. They actually use them as a source of wealth. And sheep and goats have been brought in as an alternative for the meat to bring in a protein, stronger protein into their diets, because prior to that, mostly all they did was milk and blood from the cow. So they milk the cow by putting a hole in the jugular vein and taking out only a part of the milk that they drink as a source of protein. And of course, as we develop into areas, we tell them, this is not enough protein to sustain the number of people and the lives that you have and you want to live. So the foods that are brought in are bringing in a lot of small stock. Those small stock come into conflict with the smaller predators like the cheetah, and that's what's causing conflict between people and cheetah. So we're saying, how can we reduce that conflict to where it's a sustainable and tolerable level? One of the things we discovered was that there is a lighting system that was being used for wolves and bears in Australia. And these flashing lights, which is this system right here, deterred the predators from coming to the sheep enclosures by making it look like there's activity going on, but also the bright lights. If any of you have ever had a flashlight shine in your face, everything goes black for a second, and when the light goes off, it goes black again. The same thing happens to these nighttime predators. Their pupils are so dilated to see in the dark. As soon as that bright light comes on, they see nothing. So we worked together with some other local, entrepreneurs, you would call them, and they developed another lighting system with a single light that's right at the level of the eyes of the lion and the hyena that are coming into people's livestock enclosures at night. Now, how does that help cheetahs? Cheetahs don't kill livestock at night. Cheetahs opportunistically kill during the day. But if you can reduce the total number of losses to the livestock of these community members, they have a much higher tolerance, and they can take the time to listen to us more about the behavior of the predators and how to avoid getting attacked by cheetahs as well. So we started giving advice to them, and that advice was on human conflict mitigation. And a student from Colorado State University came in and said, "You're giving such great advice, but it's not well organized. Can I do my master's project as organizing this information that you share with the community and putting it together in a toolbox?" So my guys, and now about 30 other conservancies around us, and the Kenya Wildlife Service, they carry this conflict mitigation toolbox like it's a Bible, essentially, because what it does is it helps you to talk to the community members. You open up the page and say, what tracks did you see when your livestock were killed? You go and you find the tracks, and you basically play investigator at a conflict. What animal did you see? Do you know what this animal is and what this animal's behavior is? And if you're not trying to stop conflicts with the right method, then you're not going to stop conflicts. So for example, a hyena will go in through holes in the side of the enclosures if the holes are not mended. Your domestic dogs get in and out of your, we call it a boma or a manata, and they make those holes there, but you have to keep patching them. Because if a dog can get through, a hyena can get through to come in and attack your livestock. If you want the shade around your livestock enclosure and you build your livestock enclosure next to a tree that a leopard can climb up, the leopard can jump right into your manada and can also take your livestock and can jump right out with the sheep in its mouth. And so how do you get the shade without having the leopard tree that the leopard can go up? So you have to look at the behavior of each different predator and what is causing that predator to come in and reduce it. And essentially what we tell the guys in the field is, if you want a brick wall, you have to build a brick wall. But the brick walls are going to be expensive, so we're giving you alternatives that are more cost effective, can reduce your livestock loss, so you can sell your livestock and improve those enclosures over time. So what this conflict mitigation toolbox has is it has the steps that they can take to actually have full protection. As a pastoral community, it's really also important that they can move everything. So obviously you can't move a brick wall. So fencing that can be rolled up is also an alternative. Loose fencing that hangs out sideways so the leopard can't climb up it, it kind of falls and knocks the leopard down, is something they can roll up the reel of the wire, and they can move those enclosures around with them. So those are all the kinds of things that come out of this conflict mitigation toolbox. Now, I promised you that I would talk about how dogs are saving cheetahs. We are in the process of our second National Cheetah Survey, and we are going to be in our car for the next 2 to 3 years again. But this time, we have a few more tools under our belts. We have modern technology. We have a lot of tourism in Kenya. Tourism is the #1 gross development program in our country. And so we have a lot of safari operators that are out there taking pictures, naturalists that are teaching people how to take better pictures. They get a lot of pictures of cheetahs. We also have a lot of researchers, elephant researchers, giraffe researchers, who are using camera trapping to study their animals. When they get a cheetah in their camera trap, they just put it in a folder in their computer. Most of them don't ever delete a picture, because that's horrible if you're a researcher, you never delete a picture. But they keep them, but they don't do anything with those pictures. So we've made contact with all of these other people, and here I'm going to go back a little bit to Elena, who works in the Masai Mara. She is somebody that I really don't like because she sees a cheetah every day. I see their tracks, I see their poop, but I actually rarely see a cheetah. Luckily though, when Elena sees these cheetahs every day, she's been able to develop a system using the spot patterns of the cheetah to help us to recognize individual cheetahs, and therefore to help us to be able to count those cheetahs. So she has identified more than 65 cheetahs in the Masai Mara alone on their spot pattern. So if you look at a cheetah's face, you've got 3 pictures of cheetahs here. Can anybody tell which 2 cheetahs are the same 2 cheetahs? Any guess? Which ones do you think? That is true, VNAR. But what you can see is no matter how they look, it's hard to tell by their face which ones. This, we cheated a little bit because we put A, B, C in the same order. What Elena has realized is their spot pattern never changes. The spot patterns on the legs and the stripes on the tail are 2 things that are very unique to each cheetah. And so if you can get those leg patterns identified, number C is a different cheetah, A and B are the same cheetah, and this is actually a different number of years. Those spot patterns stay the same from about 4 months of age all the way into adulthood. You can always find those same spots on that cheetah. So over time, if one cheetah is photographed in one conservancy or one reserve, and a camera trap or something catches it in another one outside of it, we can now make a map of how those cheetahs move just with these photographs put into an artificial intelligence system. We call it Argus Wild, is the creators of the system that we were using to help to map out those identities of those cheetahs. But not all cheetahs can be photographed, and therefore we have a national survey team that we piloted the work, that we completed all the pilot studies in 2021. So for those of you who may have heard me speak before, we've been doing the work trying to figure out how are we going to survey the entire country with a little more detail than what we did the first time. And one way that we can do that is with poop. And we as humans, I had 7 employees. For 18 months, we walked around in our conservancy study area, and where we found poop that looked like cheetah, that looked like it had cheetah footprints next to it, we picked up 300 poops. We thought, wow, we've got 300 cheetah poops. Can anybody guess how many actually turned out to be from cheetah? 10%. The rest of it was dogs, leopard, serval cats, everything else under the book. Even though all the prints looked like cheetah prints leading up to those poops, we were only 10% accurate in what we did. We started using dogs. Dogs have 300 million sensors in their nose, and they can smell cheetah poop for up to 2 kilometers away. One of our dogs actually found a cheetah scat 700 meters, which is just about a quarter of a mile away from where the cheetah scat was on the ground. We worked together with advisors who work with search and rescue dogs and with other types of conservation and contraband dogs to give us advice on how to train it. All of my staff are Kenyan. I'm the only non-Kenyan staff. We now have 3 dogs that are fully trained on finding cheetah scat. And with the first study that we did, in 28 days, found 150 scats, 97% accurate. So dogs are pretty amazing. And we learned about this from way back in World War I. Dogs were used as tools to find explosives. And so we used the techniques that are used in explosive searches, drug searches, and cadaver forensic searches as well. This dog is Maddie. And when we first got Maddie, he came from somebody who had a Rottweiler and a collie, mother and father, that were obsessed with balls. And Maddie was obsessed with playing with balls. When he was a puppy, everybody said, Rottweilers are too doofy. You're not going to get a Rottweiler to find cheetah scat. Maddie has found 400 in the course of his 10-year life. So he's pretty amazing. He's getting ready to retire, which is why we just got a new dog on our staff. And so Maddie has done what we had hoped would be done. What we train these dogs to do, they have to be physically fit. So do the keepers, the caretakers who walk with them. So on non-work days, they still wear their boots, but they wear a different type of backpack. And they know that a walk day is a fun day because they get to smell everything. And when they put on their gear, when they put on their tactical gear, it's like us putting on a uniform to go to work. You know you're focused on work. And they're trained to focus and have a good work ethic. We use all positive reinforcement. But when one of these dogs finds a cheetah poop, it never moves. You can call it and it won't come back. So you can see the collar on this dog is a GPS collar. It has an antenna. Most of our searches are done on leash, but when we possibly can, we let them go off leash because they can find much more when they're off leash than us trying to be dragged behind them. And so the GPS collar helps us not only to track how well their searches go and look at the quality of the search itself and how much area it covers, but if they're off leash, it allows us to find the dog because it's a hunting collar that basically says the dog is on target, and so we can go and find the dog in the thick bush. If we're in an area that is unsafe, we have elephants, we have lions, we have leopards, and when we know that there are things that are unsafe, we always keep the dog on a leash, and we use roads because luckily cheetahs like to poop on roads. And so we use the roads to do the searches so the car can stay behind it, but we also pre-program the searches. So we go and do a reconnaissance, we map out where we're going to do a search, we've done our interviews, community interviews, and we know where a cheetah has been, because obviously if there's no cheetah, there's no poop, right? So you kind of have to know that cheetahs exist in the area first. And then, yeah, these dogs do their amazing work. The other thing that we do, this is how we divided the country. The interviews that we conducted with first experts and managers have helped us to identify sites where we believe the cheetah populations are strong enough, or where we had gaps in knowledge of what is existing in those areas. Like, we're not sure if we're still going to find cheetahs in those 2 areas up north or those 2 up there. We're not even sure if we can go up into the one at the very top, because that's very insecure up there. But these are the areas that we intend to do the searches, and this is why I said I'm going to be camping out of the back of my car for the next 2 to 3 years. So we've identified 25 key locations. Our next step is to go into each location with our team of interviewers, and to get the information on the presence of cheetahs. So we've done some modeling as a part of the pilot studies that we've done. This is going to get a little scientific for a little bit here. But what it is we've looked at that Salama study area where I told you we monitored a population to extinction. And we looked at the time that we went there in the beginning, and we have an adequate amount of data for time step 1. What are the variables present in that area that enabled the cheetahs to live there? And after the disturbance and after the cheetah numbers have gone down to 0, what has changed in that area? And so thousands and thousands of data points about prey, about weather, about slope, about habitat have all been collected. And this is the pretty little map that gets developed. And it shows that there was a 50% loss in habitat in just that 15 years. So our main study area, which you can kind of see is blocked out here, our main study area where the 30 cheetahs lived has now become an area where there's no suitable habitat left for the cheetahs. We expanded the whole area to look at the area surrounding it because we had a bit of cheetah information. I have another map that has the dots with all the actual cheetah sightings from neighboring conservancies as well. So we expanded the area to cover areas where cheetahs still do exist, so that we could look at what's happening. This is a 2-color view of the same thing, just because it's a little bit stronger, showing that 38% of the habitat in that area at time step 1 was suitable for cheetahs, and in time step 2, only 17% of that area remained suitable for cheetahs. And what we looked at in variables, there were about 25 different variables that we looked at as to what influences the cheetah presence the most. In the past, or the time step 1, precipitation in the driest season influenced whether or not cheetahs were there. The slope, which is the change in altitude, and the potential prey distribution was number 3. In the current range, where there are still cheetahs, the things that make the habitat suitable, the prey distribution has become the most important thing. In this study also, she looked at hair samples from the scats and looked at what the cheetahs are eating, and we found that similar to most of the other areas where cheetahs are studied, the cheetahs don't like to eat the same thing every day. One day they're going to eat a rabbit, another day they're going to eat a dik-dik, another day they're going to eat a Grant's gazelle, but they don't eat Grant's gazelle every day. So they're not present where only Grant's gazelles are in plenty. They have to have a variety of prey. So the distribution of the prey is very important to what the cheetahs use to select their current habitat. The annual temperature throughout the year has become more important than just the dry season temperature, meaning that these cheetahs are becoming more residential. They need to have the ability to stay there year-round. They're not moving as much because also the prey base doesn't move as much. And elevation itself, we realized that the reason elevation became more important than slope is because there are levels of vegetation that are good for cattle, where there is more and less grazing, and those cheetah habitat areas that are still more secure are where there are less cattle, and where the people are not grazing every day the way they are at the lower altitudes. So that's kind of the gist of what the studies are showing in the distribution of cheetahs, and we're now going to be looking at that on a range-wide scale. But our second dog program is Ginger's Hope. Ginger's Hope was our first attempt at doing a scat dog. Ginger loved rabbits, and she loved Tanya, rats. And so she would go off looking like she's looking for cheetah scat, and she'd stick her nose down the rat hole and say, I found something. And we didn't have the skills at that time to know how to retrain her to focus. And that's why we started with all of the other partners. But Ginger became my pet, and Ginger lived to be 17 years old. So we named our rabies and distemper vaccination program Ginger's Hope, because I hope that all the dogs in Kenya can have a long and healthy life the way that Ginger did. And while we were doing our national survey, I was bitten by a dog. I was playing with a dog that was very friendly, and suddenly the dog turned on me and bit me. And I knew that I had had a rabies vaccine in the past, but I thought, well, I'll just go get a booster rabies vaccine just in case. But 2 days later, the staff person from that area said, you know, that dog started getting aggressive towards other people, and it just suddenly died. And I said, oh, well, we should probably get it tested for rabies. It's been vaccinated, right? And he goes, who vaccinates dogs? Why do you vaccinate dogs? And I realized that people really didn't understand in this pastoral community that vaccination prevents diseases, even in dogs. They vaccinated their cows, but they weren't vaccinating their dogs. So in 2018, we did a survey of people's knowledge about their dogs, in 2016. And what we realized is that dogs are living only to about 3 to 4 years old. And they're not even in their prime for protecting your livestock against predators at 3 to 4 years old. They're still kind of puppies, and they're still kind of afraid. So we initiated the Ginger's Hope campaign with a rabies vaccination campaign to start with. We also found out that 2,000 people die in Kenya per year from rabies. And the only way to really prevent rabies is to stop the spread of rabies, which is usually domestic dogs. So the first year we vaccinated almost 800 dogs. We thought that was pretty good, so we looked at how many dogs are actually present in the area. We realized that that's only 40% of the population of dogs in our area. In order to eradicate human rabies, you have to vaccinate 70% for 5 years in a row. We also, in early 2018, we had a distemper outbreak. We lost all but one wild dog in our neighboring conservancy in Laikipia. We lost wild dogs, jackals, a lot of hyenas, and probably a lot of the cat species that we haven't been monitoring yet in our area as well. So we decided we have to add distemper vaccines to this. But at that time, the government was funding the rabies vaccines, but we had to raise our own money to do the distemper vaccines. But we thought that it was important enough that we did the efforts to raise the funds to do it. And now we are vaccinating together with some of our neighboring conservancies, 4,000 dogs and cats. Looking at how to control human rabies, they said to complement, if you can't reach 70%, to complement, you've got to stop having so many puppies. You've got to get your population mostly to have been vaccinated at least once or twice. So we partnered with the local Humane Society, and we're now doing a sterilization campaign, which we're sterilizing about 150 dogs and cats per year as a part of this whole mass vaccination campaign. And we've now been doing the mass vaccination since 2016. We also did some fundraising to study whether or not we're having an impact on the diseases that are in the domestic dog population, especially the rabies and distemper. And it was a little easier to raise enough money to do the distemper study, so we did the distemper study first. We still have the samples, and we just got enough money to do the rabies tests. So next year I'll be able to say what we have in rabies. But 30% of the dogs were positively exposed to distemper, whether they had or had not been vaccinated in the past. And 10% of them had active distemper, meaning they were spreading distemper around. And so that's a pretty high amount of distemper in that area, knowing that that distemper is getting spread into the wildlife as well. So we need to step it up. We need to vaccinate more dogs, and we need to do more education programs to maintain the effect that we want to maintain. So we wrote a book, and one of those books is available over here to look at. It's going to be available on Kindle in the next 2 weeks. And our book was the story of a Samburu dog that shares its story about both finding our detection dogs, but also about getting vaccinations and about protecting your livestock against predator attacks and the deterrent lights. It's all in a kid's book, because we wanted to be able to now get that kids book into the schools in the area to try to help educate the youth a little bit more about the value of caring better for your dogs. We also use our scat detection dogs to go around to the schools and to teach people that dogs are really smart and how to put a leash on and how to walk with your dog and handle your dog better, because they're not handled really nicely in the Samburu community as a whole. So we're trying to improve that as well. So the ways that you guys can help, I want to give you something to take home and what you can do. Of course, there's always being able to make donations and purchases. We have a store online with a lot of these products available on the store. Making any kind of donations as Christmas comes up and you're not sure what to give some people, a donation to conservation organizations like mine or somebody else's who works within communities can help in conservation a lot. We also have safaris available. So we do what we call our adventure safaris, which the adventure safari spends a little bit of time on a safari and several days at our camp doing a project with us, with the community. So we do vegetation surveys and we build something called eco benches, where we use recycled plastic to build benches at schools and in community meeting areas. And that's something that the adventure safari does. Then we have other safaris that are more of the traditional safaris, but we go and give a cheetah talk or spend a day with you looking for cheetahs. So there's about 3 different types of safaris depending on your price range and how long you want to spend, available on our website. We also take volunteers and students. So as you guys get bigger and if you're thinking about projects in conservation, please contact us and we can help you figure out what kind of a project you might be able to do. So those are ways that you guys can help with this, the website. We will have a 10% discount on our merchandise for the next couple of months. So if you use that code, you can get a 10% discount. And the way that I fund all of these projects is through donations. So donations like the Potter Park Zoo that you guys help to support, and several other zoos across the country. We write grants, we get these donations, we have private donations that come through online as well. And it's all it's a charity organization. So we are a 501c3 and we rely on that support to do the work that we need to do. So if anybody has any questions, you can ask questions. If anybody wants to go shopping, you can definitely go look at the tables. And if anybody wants to come and talk to me as I finish up selling at the table, you can ask some questions now. You can come and chat with me more. Thank you guys for your time today. I know it's beautiful.